Pokemon have either 1 or 2 types at a time. But what if it was always 2? What if single-typed Pokemon didn't exist? Today, I'll be giving every single
fully evolved, because that's what matters most,
Pokemon that only has 1 type a second one. Some will be perfect fits, many will be stretches, and none will have any regard for game balance. Blastoise is now Water Steel. Its cannons look metal and it gets Flash Cannon as an Evo move. Raticate is now normal water. They use their webbed feet to swim across rivers. Arbok is now Poison Dark. It's vengeful, intimidating, and just generally mean. Raichu is now Electric Dark. Okay, I know this sounds weird, but many of its dex entries talk about how it gets aggressive when it has too much electricity. So much so that it might even attack its own trainer. That is Dark-type behavior. Plus it creates a nice duality with Alolan Raichu. Sandslash is now Ground Steel. Bit of a stretch, but its claws and horns are tough enough to be used to make tools, plus its Alolan form is Steel type. Clefable is now Fairy Normal. It was Normal type for many years, so it can be one again. Ninetales is now Fire Ghost. This may shock you, since for many years people have said it should have been a Fire Psychic type due to its mystical powers. But look closer. It's said to live for 1,000 years, it's believed to be 9 reincarnated noble saints, and it inflicts 1,000-year curses on those who touch its tail. Not dying, being a vessel of souls, and cursing? That's a ghost type. Dugtrio would be Ground Dark. Never seeing its underside is deceptive. Plus, it's gotta be dark down there. Also, it gets multiple dark type moves by level up. Persian would be normal dark because it's a huge jerk. Alolan Persian would be dark grass because it can't be dark normal due to regular Persian, so instead it wields the power of the watermelon it swallowed. Golduck would be water psychic. It uses psychic powers when its forehead shimmers with light. How is it not already psychic? Arcanine would be fire fairy. Not a great match, but Fairy is the best fit for Arcanine's nobility and majesty. Alakazam would be Psychic Steel because of its spoons. Look, there are some Pokemon that really should not be dual typed. They are just distilled representations of just one type, and that's what Alakazam is for Psychic. So I had to grasp at straws. Or should I say grasp at spoons? Machamp would be fighting fire. Another stretch for sure, but its Gigantamax form has fiery energy coming out of its hands, so there's gotta be some fire in there, and it does learn several fire-type moves. Rapidash would be fire normal. Plenty of element normal type Pokemon are regular animals with some element sprinkled in, and I think Rapidash fits that description. Muck would be poison ground because it poisons the ground and it gets some mud moves. I'll be real, this one was super hard. Hypno would be Psychic Dark because of its hypnotism. Mind control is a pretty Psychic Dark thing, as evidenced by Malamar. Kingler would be Water Bug because Dwebble and Crustle already established that crabs can count as bugs. Electrode would be Electric Steel. Hisuian Electrode is Electric Grass because it's made of wood like the Pokeballs of the time. So why isn't Cantonian Electrode Steel type since modern Pokeballs are metal? Marowak would be Ground Dark. Most of its dex entries discuss how it is vicious, ferocious, and savage. Hitmonlee would be Fighting Dark. I'll admit, big stretch here. Like its legs. One of its dex entry mentions attacking a fleeing opponent, and that's not very nice. Hitmonchan would be Fighting Fire. An even bigger stretch than Hitmonlee, but one dex entry says that it punches so fast that even a slight graze could cause a burn. And that was enough for me. Weezing would be Poison Flying. It deals with gas, already floats, and this would allow it to use neutralizing gas while still being immune to ground. Kangaskhan would be Normal Fighting. You ever seen its Mega? That baby is ready to brawl. Seaking would be Water Fairy. It's pretty and colorful and basically an aquatic unicorn, so it reminds me of Galarian Rapidash. Pinsir would be Bug Fighting. It makes it a closer counterpart of Heracross, plus Pinsir only learns 2 different bug moves in Gen 8, while it gets 11 different fighting moves. Tauros would be Normal Steel, and Paldean Tauros combat breed would be Fighting Steel, since their horns look metal and they get Iron Head. Ditto would be Normal Fairy because it's pink. It really doesn't matter what type this thing is. It never keeps it for more than a turn. Next up are the Kanto evolutions, and I'm gonna do something fun. Since all the evolution types are types that were special before the physical split, plus Fairy, which definitely would have been special, I'm giving each evolution a different formerly physical type. So Vaporeon would be Water Ghost, since it disappears in water and gets Shadow Ball. Jolteon would be Electric Bug, since in Gen 1 only it and Beedrill got Pin Missile, one of the very few bug-type attacks. Flareon would be Fire Fighting, since it has the highest physical attack of all the evolutions, and Fighting-type Pokemon have the highest average attack stat of all the types. I'll get to the other evolutions later since I'm going in National Pokedex order. Snorlax would be Normal Ground, since it's a roadblock, lives in the mountains, and learns several Ground-type moves. Mewtwo would be Psychic Dark. I feel like this one doesn't need much explanation. This dude is hostile. Mew would be Psychic Fairy, because it basically is a little fairy, and it gives a type advantage over Mewtwo, which makes their battle fairer due to its lower stats. Gen 2! Meganium would be Grass Fairy. Its scent calms aggressive feelings, and that's something most fairy types do. Typhlosion would be Fire Ground. It's based on mustelids, many of which burrow, and it gets several ground moves. Feraligatr would be Water Dragon. It's a big, beefy reptile and learns a lot of dragon-type moves, including Dragon Dance. Furret would be Normal Ground since it burrows a lot. Ampharos would be Electric Dragon since its Mega Evolution is. Blossom would be Grass Fairy since the sounds its petals make are relaxing. Sudowoodo would be Rock Ground. It's really easy to just add the ground type to a pure rock type because there's so many rock ground Pokemon, but also it kind of makes sense. If it burrowed its feet into the dirt, it'd be a more convincing tree. Politoed would be Water Normal. Quick explanation here. Pokemon has no sound type, so sound-related things tend to get lumped into the normal type. Sound-focused Pokemon like Jigglypuff, Exploud, Chatot, Meloetta, and Obstagoon are normal type, and a little over half of all the sound moves that soundproof blocks are also normal type. Therefore, if a Pokemon has a high association with sound, then normal type is a logical fit for it. Most of Politoed's dex entries discuss its cries or songs, so Water Normal actually makes a lot of sense. Sunflora would be Grass Normal. If the Smoliv line is Grass Normal, the Sunkern line can be too. Espeon would be Psychic Flying. It sounds odd, but it reads air currents, and elemental air is lumped into the flying type. Umbreon would be Dark Poison. Its first dex entry ever says, when agitated, this Pokemon protects itself by spraying poisonous sweat from its pores. Gross. Unknown would be Psychic Ghost because it's representing the writing of long dead people. Wobbuffet would be Psychic Fighting. Its two most famous moves are Counter and Mirror Coat. Counter is fighting and Mirror Coat is psychic, so its type could represent the two of those. Also, it's literally a punching bag. Granbull would be Fairy Normal, since like Clefable, it used to be normal type. Octillery would be Water Dark. It steals nests, and it famously uses ink to surround its opponents in darkness. Donphan would be Ground Fighting due to its relationship to Great Tusk, which is clearly a much closer connection than its link to Iron Treads. Smeargle would be Normal Poison, since the other painting mammal, Grafaiai, is that same type. Hitmontop would be Fighting Ground, since its top head can be used to bore its way into the ground. It even learns Dig by level up and gets Drill Run too. Miltank would be Normal Dark because it's evil and I hate it! Sorry, actually it'd be Normal Fairy. Its milk is super nutritious, and many fairy types are associated with nutritious or sweet food. Also, it's pink, it gets Play Rough by level up, and I believe that had the fairy type existed in Gen 2, Whitney would have been a fairy gym leader instead. Blissey would be Normal Fairy since its whole thing is healing. Honestly, I think it's really weird that it wasn't one of the normal types that turned fairy type. Raikou would be Electric Water. I know it's weird and it clashes with Suicune, but this one was hard. All I really had to go on was that it carries rain clouds and that it learns Scald. Entei would be Fire Ground. Its barks cause volcanic eruptions, and technically lava is hot earth. Suicune would be Water Flying. It's the reincarnation of north winds and blows around the world. As mentioned earlier and in other videos of mine, elemental air is lumped in with the flying type, even if what's happening is not explicitly flight related. Also, Suicune is one of the few non-flying type Pokemon to learn Tailwind and Air Slash. Gen 3! Sceptile would be Grass Dragon because its Mega is. Duh. Mightyena would be Dark Normal because it's an early route animal and thus predisposed to being a normal type. Linoone would be Normal Ground because, like Typhlosion, it's based on mustelids and thus likely to burrow. I'll be real though, this one was tough. Definitely makes a lot more sense as just a pure normal type. Slacking would be normal fighting since, look at those hands! They're meant for clobbering! Exploud would be normal ground since it triggers earthquakes with the tremors it creates by bellowing. Hariyama would be fighting steel due to its extremely tough muscles and being an effective user of heavy slam. Delcatty would be normal fairy, it's fanciful and learns several fairy type moves. Manectric would be electric fire, since the sparks from its mane sometimes ignite forest fires. Plus it gets a couple fire type moves. Plusle and Minun would be electric fairy. They're cute, cheerful cheerleaders, and we already have a Pika clone that's fairy type, so it's easy to make these the same. Volbeat and Illumise would be bug flying, since frankly it's weird that they're not. Swalot would be poison normal. Absolutely nothing about this Pokemon fits any type except poison. So we're just tacking on normal because I don't know what else to do. Wailord would be water flying. Mantine is water flying despite only ever gliding, and Wailord is a blimp that breaches. Close enough. Torkoal would be fire rock. Its shell is literally full of coal, and we have a fire rock type coal Pokemon. Grumpig would be Psychic Dark, since it uses the black pearls on its body to amplify its psychic power waves for gaining total control over its foe. As previously discussed, Mind Control fits with a Psychic Dark type. Spinda would be normal Psychic, since its eyes and teetering cause confusion, a status condition commonly associated with the Psychic type due to the move Confusion. It also gets quite a lot of Psychic type moves. Zangoose would be normal fighting, since it's literally born to battle. Seviper would be Poison Steel, since its tail is consistently referred to as a sword-like blade that it even polishes like a knife. Milotic would be Water Fairy, since its beauty calms hostility, which is a very fairy thing to do. All 4 cast forms would gain flying. They float and deal with weather, which is in the sky and air patterns and such, and I want it to make more sense on Team Sky than it currently does. Kecleon would be normal dragon because it's a lizard. I'm sorry, that's all I got. Banette would be Ghost Dark. This is one twisted Pokemon, and it learns a bunch of dark moves, including one as its evolution move. Chimecho would be Psychic Normal due to the aforementioned normal sound connection, and Chimecho is a literal wind chime. The 2 halves of its name are both sound words. Absol would be Dark Fairy, since it's viewed as an evil, disaster-causing Pokemon when it actually aims to just warn people. So essentially, it's a good guy, but misunderstood. Also, its mega form gets angel wings, which are kind of like fairy wings. Glalie was tough. It's very clearly an ice type, but like, in addition to that, I'm not really sure. Like, a dark type could maybe work since Frostlass is a ghost type, but maybe there's something else that it has a body made of rock. Oh, well, all right then, Ice Rock. Huntail would be Water Dark, since it lives in pitch blackness and hunts using trickery with its fish-shaped tail. Gorbis would be Water Fairy, since while it is cruel and drains body fluids, it's got grace and beauty and learns Draining Kiss. And it's pink! Love would also be Water Fairy. How did the heart-shaped love Pokemon not get fairy? It's time for the Reggies, and I'm gonna tell you right now, they're gonna be stupid. Regirock would be Rock Ground, because the ground has rocks. Regice would be Water Ice, because ice is water. And Registeel would be Steel Fire, because it was forged in the Earth's mantle and liquid metal is hot. Basically, I just grabbed the types of the Delta Reggies from Pokemon Insurgents and just tacked them on as secondary types. Kyogre would be Water Ice, since as I mentioned, ice is water, but also big parts of the sea are frozen. And Kyogre learns quite a few ice moves, including 2 by level up. Groudon would be Ground Fire, since that's what type it is in its primal form, and Deoxys would be Psychic Poison, since it was literally born from a virus. Gen 4! Kricketune would be Bug Normal because sound. Luxray would be Electric Dark. I know a lot of people actually think Luxray is already Dark type, but it's not. However, it does make some amount of sense. Dark fits best with aggressive Pokemon, or ones that use cruel, underhanded tactics. Luxray is not either one of those, but Dark can also work for Pokemon that work in the shadows, like Greninja. Luxray sees through walls, hunting prey this way and allowing it to even hunt in darkness, so this is kind of shadow work. It's not a perfect fit. It's just kind of a fit. I think the biggest reason people think it's a dark type is because it learns Crunch and is dark colored. But it's the best option we really have. Rampardos would be Rock Dragon. Cranidos and Rampardos are the only single-typed fossil Pokemon, and that's just not fair. Give them dragon like Tyrunt and Tyrantrum since they're both bipedal dinosaurs. Pachirisu would be electric fairy, which I think fits for most all the Pikachu clones. Floatzel would be water normal since it's a land animal that goes into the water, like Babarrel. Cherim would be grass normal since nothing else really fits. It just like really loves sunlight, and that's its entire thing. Ambipom would be normal fighting because it's adept at throwing hands. Well, tails. Lopunny would also be normal fighting because of its mega evolution. Mismagius would be ghost psychic, not only because it learns a bunch of psychic moves, but because it's a witch. The other witch Pokemon, Delphox and Hatterene, are psychic type 2. Perugly would be normal dark because it's a brazen brute that barges its way into another Pokemon's nest and claims it as its own. Hippowdon would be ground dark because it's short-tempered and easily moved to violence. Carnivine would be grass dark due to the deceptive way in which it catches prey, luring them in with its nice-smelling saliva. Lumineon would be water fairy. It glows and has actual fairy wings! Like, how was this not given fairy in Gen 6? Licky Licky would be normal poison. Their saliva contains lots of components that can dissolve anything. The numbness caused by their lick does not dissipate. Sounds poisonous to me. Tangrowth would be grass normal. Like other Pokemon we've discussed, there's really nothing that makes sense outside of grass, so normal it is. Electivire would be electric fighting, since it beats down opponents with the power of its electrified fist. Magmortar would be fire poison. It mainly shoots fire, but it also shoots smog and acid. Leafeon would be grass steel, because its hard tail can fell a large tree with one stroke, and the tail's sharpness exceeds even that of a sword crafted by a master. Very similar to Kartana, another grass steel type. Glaceon would be ice rock because it creates diamond dust, which is not literal diamonds, but it's the best I got. Porygon Z would be normal psychic, since its cybernetic design feels like it fits the psychic type, plus it learns a ton of psychic type moves. Dusknoir would be ghost dark. These types tend to pair well together, plus it sucks souls out, which is, I'll admit, more ghostly, but you know, still kind of a dark thing to do. Next up is the Lake Trio, and I tried to give them each a different secondary type that represented their domain. Uxie would be Psychic Ghost. This is the weakest of the three, but I chose it because people who see its eyes lose their memories. Which reminds me of people losing their spirit by looking into Shedinja's back hole, or how people looking into Dusclops' body are sucked into the void. Mesprit would be Psychic Fairy, since it's the emotion Pokemon, and the fairy type is closely associated with feelings. Finally, Azelf would be Psychic Fighting, since it's the willpower Pokemon, and fighting types are known for their strong wills and commitment to training. Regigigas would be normal ground since it's supposedly towed continents. Cresselia would be Psychic Fairy since it's all about the moon, and both Moonlight and Moonblast, moves it learns, are fairy type. Phione and Manaphy would be water psychic since their signature moves, Take Heart and Heart Swap, are both psychic type. Darkrai would be Dark Ghost since it phases through walls, I guess. Shaman Landform would be Grass Fairy type since it's the gratitude Pokemon, and fairies love positive emotions. Arceus would be normal dragon, since Dialga, Palkia, and Giratina are all dragon types, and it's a bit odd that Arceus was left out. Okay, I actually think it's because of the whole plate thing. They just wanted to be a simple normal type so it could be all of the other types. But if that wasn't a thing, I think there's a higher chance it would have been a dragon type. Gen 5. Serperior would be Grass Dragon since it's a reptile that learns a bunch of dragon moves. Samurott would be water fighting since it's a combat specialist, but unlike its Hisuian form, it fights honorably. Watchog would be normal psychic because it uses its glowing body parts to stun and hypnotize its opponents, and mind manipulation is psychic stuff. Stoutland would be normal ice because it excels in cold environments. Let's ignore that its ability is Sand Rush. Lightbird would be dark normal for the same reason as Mightyena. It's an early game mammal. Next are the monkeys, and like with the lake spirits, I tried to give them each a different secondary type. Simisage would be grass dark because it is ill-tempered. Simisear would be fire fairy since it loves sweets, and dessert is an aspect of the fairy type. Simipour would be water ice since it has absolutely nothing else to go on and it learns ice moves. These guys have so few dex entries, and like they all say basically the same thing. It was tough with these ones. Musharna would be Psychic Fairy since it's got Magic Fog, and its level up moveset is only Psychic moves plus 2 Fairy moves and 2 non-damaging normal moves. Zebstrika would be Electric Dark because it is ill-tempered. Clearly there's a lot of ill-tempered Pokemon. Like I said, I don't necessarily believe that all of these Pokemon should be dual-typed, it's just what I got to go on. Gigalith would be Rock Fire. I could have just made it Rock Ground, but it gets Fire type because it absorbs solar energy through its crystals. Around half of its dex entries discuss its use of solar rays. Audino would be Normal Fairy since its Mega is. Conkeldurr would be Fighting Rock since it's holding 2 big rock sticks. Although, logically, I guess this would mean that Timber would be fighting Grass, and then Girder would be fighting Steel, which like makes sense based on what they're carrying, but also that causes an issue. You can't really have 3 Pokemon in one consecutive evolutionary line all have totally different typings. I just, that's never happened. It's very weird. I might have to go back to the drawing board on this one. Oh, wait, of course. I don't actually want any of this. Who cares? Throw would be Fighting Grass because its belt is woven from vines. Sawk would be Fighting Grass too for the same reason. Lilligant would be Grass Fairy, since I've always thought it was weird that its counterpart Whimsicott got the fairy type, but Lilligant did not. Its fragrance is relaxing, and that's a fairy type thing. Basculin's red and blue striped forms would be Water Dark, because they're basically regional variants of Carvanha. And I don't have to cover the gentler white striped form because that one's not fully evolved. Both standard mode Darmanitans would gain the fighting type. They punch stuff and learn all kinds of fighting moves. Maractus would be Grass Normal. It makes sounds like maracas, and as we discussed, if it's a sound thing, it gets the normal type. Cofagrigus would be Ghost Steel since their bodies are covered in pure gold. I know gold isn't steel, but I personally strongly believe that the Steel type should have been called the Metal type, so that you could incorporate Pokemon with gold or copper bodies or other non-iron metals. Like how the Grass type should have been called the Plant type because it factors in plants that are not grass. Garbodor would be Poison Normal since like Swalot, there really is not anything about it that fits any type except poison. Zoroark would be Dark Normal to make it align more closely with its Hisuian form. Chinchino would be Normal Fairy since it's cute, clean, and gets several fairy moves. Gothitelle would be Psychic Ghost since it has seen the end of the universe, and that's gotta turn into some kind of spooky thing. Reuniclus would be Psychic Fighting since while it could use its psychic abilities in battle, this Pokemon prefers to swing its powerful arms around to beat opponents into submission. It's kind of weird to say that about it because like its physical attack is half of its special attack. But hey, if you're beating up someone with your arms, that's fighting type. Vanillix would be Ice Normal because it truly is just a pure ice type. Alomomola would be Water Fairy since it's a pink heart-shaped creature that heals other Pokemon's wounds. Again, Luvdisc, Luminion, and Alomomola, none of them getting the fairy type is a crime. And Milotic too. Frankly, like I feel like the fish, it's a bit stronger than Milotic, but seriously, all of them, how are these not fairies? Klinklang would be Steel Electric. It actually gets more electric moves than steel ones, and its line are the only non-electric type Pokemon to get plus or minus. Electros would be Electric Water, since while it can float on land, it's also definitely aquatic. Beheeyem would be Psychic Steel, since it's an alien and has a metal spaceship. Maybe. Not my best work, I'll admit, but this is another Alakazam situation. Haxorus would be Dragon Steel because it's covered in hard armor and has tusks that cut through metal easily. Beartic would be Ice Normal because it reminds me of other mostly regular animal Pokemon like Heliolisk or Pyroar. Cryogonal would be Ice Ghost because when it gets too warm, it straight up disappears. It essentially becomes sentient gas. Sound familiar? Excelgor would be Bug Poison because it spits poison. Inshao would be Fighting Normal because nothing but fighting really fits. Druddigon would be Dragon Ground because it mainly operates in tunnels and caves. Doesn't dig them itself, but look, I know a lot of people give it rock type. I don't want to do that because like its face is as hard as a rock, but it is not a rock. I realize that I gave Haxorus Dragon Steel because it can cut through steel, but it's never explicitly said to be steel. Let's not read too deeply into this. Bouffalant would be Normal Fighting because it learns a bunch of fighting moves. Eatmore would be fire normal because, again, really only fire fits it. Tornadus would be flying normal for the same reason. It really pains me to add the normal type to the first pure flying type because I think the regional birds up to this point should have been pure flying. But I had to give it something, and nothing but normal works. Gen 6. Florges would be fairy grass. It is literally fused to a flower. Go-Goat would be grass normal because to this day, I sometimes accidentally think it is. It looks like it should be part of a trio with Heliolisk and Pyroar. Very similar design aesthetics and style, and like all from Kalos. But Heliolisk and Pyroar are normal type and Go-Goat is not, and I think it's weird. Furfrou would be normal fairy due to its association with beauty and fashion. Meowstic would be Psychic Dark because, at least for the females, if they don't get what they want, they will torment you with their psychic abilities. Aromatisse would be Fairy Poison because the scent that constantly emits from its fur is so powerful that this Pokemon's companions will eventually lose their sense of smell. An odor that causes literal harm? That's a poison thing! Slurpuff would be fairy grass because it's cotton candy, and sugar is made from sugarcane plants. I know this sounds like a stretch, but look! It actually learns a bunch of grass moves, more than fairy moves. Clawitzer would be water bug because it's a pistol shrimp, which is basically an ocean bug. Reminder about Crustle. Sylveon, the final evolution, would be fairy normal. Sorry, this is a boring choice, but this thing really is just distilled fairiness. Goodra would be dragon water because it needs rain to evolve and simply loves it. Also, it gets more level up water moves than dragon ones, by a lot. Avalugg would be ice water because it ferries Birdmite across the water and can be found swimming in it in the wild. And Xerneas would be fairy grass because it was a tree. Gen 7. Gumshoos would be normal ground because it's based on a mongoose or honey badger and those burrow. Burrow, I say! Next are the 3 Lycanroc forms, and like I did for the Lake Trio and the monkeys and maybe something else, this is a really long video, I thought it would be really cool if they all had different secondary typings. Midday form would be rock fighting because it's a fighter, but it's one that's loyal and trustworthy, and I've always associated the fighting type with honorable combat. Meanwhile, midnight form would be rock dark because it's vicious and defiant if it dislikes its orders. Finally, dusk form would be rock ghost. This is the least logical typing of the 3, but its whole thing is that it's temperamental. It's usually calm, but can be ferocious. That made me think of someone possessed by a malevolent spirit, and thus the ghost type. Wishy-Washy would be water dark because it's called the demon of the sea. Mudsdale would be ground fighting because it has super powerful kicks and learns a bunch of fighting moves. Lurantis would be grass dark, not grass bug. I've made that mistake in the past, so it perfectly makes sense if you do, but its whole design premise is that it is a plant pretending to be a bug. It's like the inverse of those praying mantises that are bugs pretending to be plants. I chose the dark type because its whole thing is deception. Zarina would be grass fighting because kicking. Comfey would be fairy grass, it literally has flowers on it. Passimian would be fighting normal. Its counterpart is Oranguru, which is part normal type, so I figured it makes sense for them to share it. Pyukumuku would be water poison. Its signature move, Purify, is a poison type move. Silvally would be normal dragon because it's basically an artificial Arceus. Akus. So it makes sense for it to also be normal dragon. Komala would be normal fairy because it's small and cute and always in dreamland. And it learns play rough, I guess. Xurkitree would be electric steel because it has metal coming out of its hands, feet, and tail. Okay, I guess that's not confirmed and it doesn't really get steel moves. But like, it looks at least partially inspired by copper wire. Necrozma in its base form would be Psychic Dark. This thing is a dark prism. It eats light and it's thrown whole dimensions into darkness. How is it not a dark type? Zero Aura would be electric fighting. Just look at this brawler and all the fighting type moves it learns. It's so weird that it's not a fighting type. Then Melmetal would be steel fighting because of all of the bashing it does with those huge arms. Gen 8! Rillaboom would be grass normal. It's a drummer and again, sound equals normal type. Cinderace would be fire fighting because it's an athlete and that's basically combat. Also, it just looks like one. Really glad they made Skeledirge and broke the trend of all of the weirdly bipedal fire types. Inteleon would be water dark because it's a secret agent operating in the shadows. Its Gigantamax form is a frickin' sniper. That's dark in like the in like the yikes way. Greedent would be normal grass because it carries around a bunch of berries. Thievul would be dark normal because it's essentially just like Mightyena and Lightbird. Eldegoss would be grass normal because it reminds me of the Smoliv line. Dubwool would be normal electric because it weirdly learns Electro Ball and Wild Charge, so I like to think its wool is full of static electricity. Boltund would be electric normal because like Babarrel, it's mostly a regular animal. Sandaconda would be ground dragon because it's a reptile, learns some dragon moves, and is used by a dragon type gym leader. Barrascuda would be water flying because it launches itself out of the water using its propeller. Kinda like Mantine. Doesn't glide for as long, but it gets up there. Grappaloct would be fighting water because it's super weird that it's not. Searching for an opponent to test its skills against, it emerges onto land. Once the battle is over, it returns to the sea. It is found in the overworld water in Galar. It learns a bunch of water type moves. It is a frickin' octopus. How is it not a water type? Poltegeist would be ghost water. This is because Sinistcha is ghost grass because of the matcha it possesses. Now, of course, all tea is mostly water, but clearly the tea that Poltegeist possesses is less leaves, more water. So it can be a water type because it is tea, which is mostly water. Berserker would be steel fighting. It's a frickin' Viking, it's fighting stuff. Cursula would be ghost rock because it is clinically insane that it and Galarian Corsola are not rock types. Johto Corsola is living coral, living polyps that secrete calcium carbonate that builds up over time. Calcium carbonate is found in rocks, so it's basically a rock itself, which is why Corsola is a rock type. The Galarian ones are based on dead bleached coral, which is just the calcium carbonate left over from living coral. In other words, it's just the rock part. Why is it not a rock type? Also, it learns a ton of rock type moves, like all of the widely available ones. To this day, there is no ghost rock Pokemon, which is unhinged because these Pokemon should have been that, so obviously. Sirfetch'd would be fighting grass because it wields plant-based weaponry. Alcremie would be fairy grass because it has a fruit on it, sometimes. Phalanx would be fighting steel because it's inspired by a formation that uses metal weaponry. And also it has shields that look metallic. Pincurchin would be electric water because it is a sea urchin. Stonjourner would be rock psychic because it watches the sun's descent from zenith to horizon, which is basically exactly what Xatu does. Stonjourner is stone, so a rock type, and Xatu is a bird, so flying type, so the psychic type could have been the overlap. Ice-Q would be ice water because it lives in the ocean. Caparaja would be steel ground because its trunk is basically an excavator, and it learns as many ground moves by level up as steel ones. Zacian and Zamazenta are technically single-typed without their special items, so it's easy to say in their no-item form, they'd just still be steel. Who cares if the sword isn't there? Regieleki would be electric normal because truly nothing else works. It is sentient electrical energy. It learns almost no moves that are not electric type. What could I possibly add? Regidrago would be dragon rock because it's crystallized dragon energy, whatever that is. But hey, crystals are rocks. Both of the steeds would gain the dark type. Glastrier gets it because it's a belligerent Pokemon. Anything it wants, it takes by force. And Spectrier because it absorbs the life force of sleeping creatures. In short, they're jerks. I think this works really well though, because then Calyrex showing up and taming them removes their dark type and thus their violent nature. Finally, Gen 9. Oinkologne would be normal fairy because it lets out pleasant and soothing scents, and that's something a lot of fairy types do. Spidops would be bug dark because it's an ambush hunter and learns several dark moves. Mousehold would be normal fairy because what could be more wholesome and joyous than family? Dachsbun would be fairy ground because it's based on a dachshund, a dog breed that was bred, pun intended, to hunt vermin down in burrows. Their whole thing is doing stuff underground. Garganical would be rock fairy because it will rub its fingertips together and sprinkle injured Pokemon with salt. Even severe wounds will promptly heal afterward. It's a healer, and healers are fairy types, mostly. Bellybolt would be electric water. It's a frog, lives near water, and gets a lot of water moves. Mabostiff would be dark fairy because it loves playing with children. Though usually gentle, it takes on an intimidating look when protecting its family. It's really just a big sweetheart that just looks spooky. Cloth would be rock bug. Again, thanks to Crustle, crabs equal bugs. Espathra would be Psychic Fairy because it gets a bunch of fairy moves by level up. Wugtrio would be Water Ground. It's literally popping out of the ground like Dugtrio. Palafin would be Water Fighting. It's a superhero. Aside from a martial artist, you can't really get more fighting type than that. Earthworm would be Steel Ground. It is an earthworm. It eats earth. That is ground. Houndstone would be Ghost Ground. All the bone moves are ground type, and you always find it popping out of the dirt. Satitan would be Ice Water. I know it's a whale that moved on to land, but like it is still a whale. Dondozo would be Water Normal because nothing else really fits. The Dunsparce would be Normal Ground because it uses its hard tail to make its nest by boring holes into bedrock deep underground. It digs and drills, those are ground type things. While most of Ogerpon's forms are dual type, the Teal Mask form is single type grass. So if it had to have a second type, it would be fighting. It doles out beatdowns with its club and learns fighting moves. And finally, Terapagos. Its whole thing is being representative of all the types, so doing this is very dumb. But if I had to give it one, it would be Dragon. It's a legendary reptile, so dragon works. Thank you so much for watching. If you watched all the way to the end of this video, you probably enjoy my content. So if you've never subscribed before, please do that, I'd really appreciate it. But also if you think you are, double check you are. A lot of people think that they are because YouTube's good at recommending videos, but it turns out they're not. So either subscribe first time or double check. But that is all I have for now. So until next time, big fans, gotta catch them all.